Ancient Dictators and Assassins. Hello, dear history lovers. Today we will dive into one of the darkest and most mysterious topics of the ancient world. Yes, you guessed it right. Ancient Dictators and Assassins. This video will explore the most powerful and feared figures in history and the men in the shadows who brought about their demise. If you're ready, let's start our time travel. Our first stop is ancient Egypt. Pharaohs were known as absolute monarchs who were believed to have divine powers. However, this power did not protect them from assassination. For example, the assassination of Pharaoh Ramses III is known as the oldest recorded palace conspiracy in history. It took place around 1155 BC and was the result of a plot by one of the women in Ramses' harem to put her son on the throne. The pharaoh was found with his throat slit and poisoned. This incident shows us that even in the ancient world, even the most powerful leaders were not safe. Let's move on to ancient Greece. Here, the term tyrant was usually used to refer to a person who seized power illegally. Interestingly, however, some tyrants were loved by the people. For example, Pisistratos of Athens seized power 3 times in the 6th century BC, and each time he enjoyed the support of the people. But many tyrants became targets for assassins. Hipparchus, brother of the last Athenian tyrant Hippias, was assassinated in 514 BC by 2 lovers, Harmodius and Aristogeiton. This event paved the way for the birth of Athenian democracy. When we come to the Roman Empire, the concepts of dictatorship and assassination went hand in hand. Julius Caesar is perhaps the most famous assassination victim in history. He was assassinated with 23 stab wounds in the Senate on the Ides of March 15th, in 44 BC. The fact that Brutus, one of his closest friends, was among the assassins has engraved the phrase, "You too, Brutus," in history. This event marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the imperial era. Caesar's nephew and heir Augustus became the first emperor of Rome and tried to avoid the appearance of dictatorship by taking the title of princeps, first citizen. But many emperors after him sought absolute power and often paid for it with their lives. For example, Caligula, known as the Mad Emperor, was murdered by his own guards after only 4 years on the throne. What about the assassins? Who were these men of the shadows? Most often, assassins were political rivals, disgruntled soldiers, or individuals seeking personal revenge. But sometimes there were professional assassins. In ancient Persia, a secret sect known as the Hashashis trained members for political assassinations. This group became a major force in the Middle East from the 11th to the 13th century. Now let's go a little further east, to ancient China. Qin Shi Huang, who took the title of first emperor in China, unified China in 221 BC. But his ruthless rule led to many assassination attempts. The emperor became so paranoid that he tried to protect himself with an army of his famous terracotta soldiers in a huge underground tomb complex. Ironically, he's thought to have died of mercury poisoning in his quest for the elixir of immortality. In ancient India, Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire, ascended to the throne during a period of political intrigue and assassinations. His chief advisor Kautilya, aka Chanakya, writing about statecraft and political strategies in his famous Arthashastra, elaborated on the use of assassinations as a political tool. In the ancient world, the concepts of dictatorship and assassination were so intertwined that in some cultures assassination of tyrants was considered a legitimate act. For example, in ancient Greece, those who killed tyrants were called tyrannoktonoi, tyrant killers, and were often referred to as heroes. But what about cases where assassinations failed? These often led to periods of even greater oppression and persecution. The failed Piso conspiracy against the Roman Emperor Nero in 65 AD resulted in the execution of hundreds of people. It exacerbated Nero's already paranoid mindset and led him to become an even more ruthless ruler in his last years. One of the most interesting dictator-assassin relationships in the ancient world was between Mithridates VI and Rome. Mithridates, king of Pontus, resisted Rome for many years and became immune by regularly taking small doses of poison to protect himself from being poisoned. This practice became a term known today as Mithridatism. One of the most interesting dictator-assassin relationships in the ancient world was between Mithridates VI and Rome. Mithridates, king of Pontus, resisted Rome for many years and became immune by regularly taking small doses of poison to protect himself from being poisoned. This practice became a term known today as Mithridatism. Let's take a closer look at one of the most famous assassinations of the ancient world, Caesar's assassination. This event changed not only Roman history, but the course of world history. Caesar, after being declared dictator, was assassinated by a group of up-senators who feared that the Republic would be destroyed forever. But this action led to the very thing they were trying to prevent: the birth of the Roman Empire. The motivations of the assassins were varied. Some were motivated by political ideals, others by personal ambition or revenge. For example, among the assassins who killed the Roman Emperor Domitian were court officials who feared the emperor would execute them. In the ancient world, assassinations were not only carried out with knives or swords. Poison was one of the most popular assassination methods. This method, which was especially preferred among female assassins, brought many rulers to their end. For example, Cleopatra is said to have committed suicide by having herself bitten by a snake, although some historians suggest that this may have actually been an assassination. The results of assassinations were often very different from what the assassins hoped for. For example, the assassination of Julius Caesar, instead of saving the Republic, led to the birth of a more powerful empire. Similarly, many tyrants were killed and replaced by even more ruthless rulers. The concepts of dictatorship and assassination were so common in the ancient world that they became frequent themes in literature and art. Greek tragedies often dealt with the fall of tyrants. In Rome, Suetonius' Lives of the 12 Caesars detailed the lives of emperors and the violent deaths of many of them. But what about the assassins themselves? More often than not, assassins were summarily executed after their deeds, rather than being hailed as heroes. In some cases, however, assassins who overthrew a particularly popular tyrant were praised by the public. In Athens, for example, statues of Harmodius and Aristogiton were erected, and songs written. The relationship between dictatorship and assassination in the ancient world shows how fragile power dynamics are. Even the most powerful leaders were aware that they could lose their lives at any moment. This could lead to paranoia and even more repressive rule. The use of assassination as a political tool was quite common in the ancient world, but it did not always produce the desired results. Often the death of one dictator only led to the rise of another. This cycle was one of the main reasons for the political instability of ancient societies. One of the most interesting assassination stories of the ancient world is the death of the Persian king Cambyses I. Cambyses set out to conquer Egypt and died on his way back, accidentally wounded by his own sword. However, some historians suggest that it may have actually been an assassination and that Cambyses may have been killed by his own generals. In ancient China, assassination attempts against Qin Shi Huang, the founder of the Qin dynasty, are among the most creative in history. On one occasion, an assassin planned to present the emperor with a poisoned map. On another occasion, it was planned to use a huge block of lead to kill the emperor. In ancient Greece, the death of Leonidas II, king of Sparta, is an interesting case in point. Leonidas, who held out against the Persian army until the last moment at the Battle of Thermopylae, was not technically a victim of assassination. However, his death and that of 300 Spartans can be seen as a kind of voluntary assassination. This sacrifice gave the Greek city-states time to prepare for the Persian army. In the Roman Empire, assassinations were so common that the period between 235–284 AD is called the period of the soldier emperors. During this 49-year period, more than 20 emperors ascended to the throne, most of whom were killed by assassination or rebellion. In ancient Egypt, the death of Pharaoh Tutankhamun remains a mystery. Some theories suggest that the young pharaoh may have been assassinated. Examination of his mummy shows a crack in the skull, but whether this was the cause of death or a result of the mummification process is still under debate. The life of Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Maurya Empire in ancient India, is an interesting example of the measures taken to avoid assassinations. Chandragupta was so paranoid that he changed his bedroom every day, and the plates he ate from were destroyed after every meal. In the ancient Persian Empire, the accession of King Darius V to the throne was also marked by assassinations. Darius conspired with 6 noble Persians to overthrow a usurper known as the false Smerdis. This event is described in detail in Herodotus's histories and is considered one of the most famous court intrigues of the ancient world. In ancient Carthage, the famous general Hannibal met his end in an assassination. Hannibal, exiled after fighting against Rome for many years, sought refuge with King Prusias of Bithynia. But when the Romans forced Prusias to surrender Hannibal, the great commander committed suicide by drinking poison to avoid capture. In a way, this can be seen as an assassination carried out by Rome from afar. In ancient Greece, the assassination of King Philippos II of Macedonia is also noteworthy. He was assassinated by one of his own guards at his daughter's wedding ceremony in 336 BC. There were suspicions that his son and heir, Alexander the Great, was behind the assassination, but this claim was never proven. The death of the Roman Emperor Claudius is one of the most famous cases of poisoning in the ancient world. Thought to have been poisoned by his 4th wife and niece Agrippina, Claudius's death led to his stepson Nero ascending the throne. This is an indication of how dangerous family intrigue could be. In ancient Egypt, Queen Cleopatra VII had her brother and husband Ptolemy XIV murdered. Cleopatra drowned her brother in the Nile River and ascended the throne alone. This incident shows that female rulers in the ancient world could also be ruthless. In ancient Armenia, a failed assassination attempt by the sons of King Tigranes II shows the extent of family strife. Tigranes had his sons executed after the plot was uncovered, an example of how assassination attempts can have severe consequences when they fail. In ancient Japan, the accession of Jimmu, considered the first emperor, was also marked by assassinations. According to legend, Jimmu eliminated the leaders of rival clans by inviting them to a banquet and having them poisoned. This shows that assassinations are not unique to the Western world, but are also common in Eastern cultures. In ancient Iran, the assassination of the Persian Emperor Darius III by one of his own generals, Bessus, shows how dangerous internal betrayals can be. Bessus declared himself king, killing Darius during the advance of Alexander the Great, but was soon captured and executed. In ancient Greece, the life and death of the Athenian statesman Alcibiades illustrates the complexities of political intrigue and assassination. Alcibiades changed sides many times during his career and was eventually killed by assassins backed by Sparta and Persia. In Rome, the murder of Emperor Commodus is also an interesting example. Strangled by his own wrestling coach, Commodus's death shows that anyone within the court could be a potential assassin. This event also inspired the movie Gladiator. In ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Tutmosis III's assassination of his stepmother and regent queen Hatshepsut was actually a kind of historical erasure operation. After taking the throne, Tutmosis tried to erase Hatshepsut from history by systematically destroying her monuments and statues. Although this was not a physical assassination, it can be considered a form of historical assassination. In ancient China, the death of Qin Shi, the last emperor of the Qin dynasty, shows the complexity of court intrigue. He was forced to commit suicide as a result of a conspiracy organized by his chief vizier Li Si and the eunuch Zhao Gao. This event marked the beginning of the War of the Three Kingdoms in China. In ancient India, the death of Brihadratha, the last ruler of the Maurya Empire, demonstrates the influence of the military on political power. Killed during a military parade by his own army commander Pushyamitra Shunga, Brihadratha's death led to the establishment of the Shunga dynasty. In ancient Greece, the murder of the Athenian statesman Ephialtes shows that even democracy was not immune from assassination. Ephialtes had introduced reforms that strengthened Athenian democracy, but these reforms harmed the interests of the aristocratic class, and he was eventually assassinated. The death of the Roman Emperor Elagabalus is one of the most brutal assassinations in the ancient world. Killed by his own guards when he was just 18 years old, Elagabalus's body was dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. This incident shows the extent of the anger of the Roman people against an emperor they hated. In the ancient Persian Empire, the poisoning of King Artaxerxes III by his vizier Bagoas shows how dangerous palace intrigue can be. Bagoas then poisoned Artaxerxes' son Arses and put Darius III on the throne. However, Darius realized Bagoas's plans and had him killed with his own poison. In ancient Macedonia, the murder of King Alexander III, father of Philippos II, the father of Alexander the Great, shows the extent of family strife. Alexander was killed during a hunting party by his own nephew and brother-in-law Ptolemy. In ancient Carthage, the death of the general Mago is an interesting example of how political rivals were eliminated. Mago was killed as an accident in a conspiracy organized by his rival Hanno. This incident reveals the ruthless rivalry in Carthage's internal politics. The murder of the Roman Emperor Caracalla shows how personal revenge can have huge political consequences. Caracalla had executed the brother of Macrinus, the commander of his guard regiment. In revenge, Macrinus had Caracalla killed and became emperor himself. In ancient Armenia, the death of King Artavasdes II is an example of the interference of foreign powers in domestic politics. Artavasdes was captured by the Roman general Marcus Antony and later killed in Egypt on Cleopatra's orders. This event shows the extent of international political intrigue in the ancient world. In ancient Greece, the assassination of the Athenian statesman Cimon is another example of how political rivals were eliminated. Cimon was assassinated by his rivals for his pro-Spartan policies. This event led to significant changes in Athens' foreign policy. The death of the Roman Emperor Aurelian shows how personal ambition can have great consequences. Aurelian was killed in a conspiracy organized by his own secretary. The secretary feared that the emperor would punish him, and this fear led to the death of one of the most successful emperors of the Roman Empire. In ancient Egypt, the murder of Pharaoh Amenemhat shows the complexity of palace intrigue. Amenemhat was killed as a result of a conspiracy organized by the women of his own harem. This event marked the end of the Middle Kingdom and ushered in a new era in Egyptian history. As a result, in the ancient world, dictatorships and assassinations were an integral part of political life. They were not just historical events, but a complex reflection of human emotions such as power, ambition, betrayal, and sometimes idealism. Assassinations often did not have the desired result and sometimes even had the opposite effect. The overthrow of a dictator often led to greater chaos or the rise of a more ruthless dictator. These events show us how dangerous and volatile the political atmosphere of the ancient world was. Leaders had to be constantly on guard against threats from outside and from their own inner circle. This could lead to paranoia and more repressive rule. However, these assassinations and intrigues also reflect the dynamic nature of the ancient world. They can also be seen as catalysts for change and transformation of societies. In some cases, an assassination could lead to the establishment of a new dynasty, the collapse of an empire, or the complete change of the political system of a city-state. From today's perspective, these events remind us how slippery a slope political power is, and how leadership carries great responsibilities and risks. At the same time, they show how quickly the balance of power can shift, and how the course of history can sometimes depend on a single event. The cases we explore throughout this video reveal the complex political structure of the ancient world, the darker aspects of human nature, and how dramatic history can be. Ancient dictators and assassins may be just names on the pages of history, but their stories make up one of the most striking and thought-provoking chapters in human history. It's hard not to think deeply about power, leadership, and political change when studying this subject. These dark and intriguing pages of the ancient world not only tell us about the past, but also help us better understand the world today and human nature. Dear viewers, I hope this video has given you new insights into this dark and exciting side of the ancient world. If you want to continue exploring these dramatic pages of history, check out our other videos. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date with our new content. See you in our next video. Bye.